Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Punch, Kick, Choke, Chat. My name is Sean Benson. I'm one of your hosts. It is 8:30 p.m. Toronto time because I'm talking to you from my home. I'm here indefinitely, and I'm so happy about that. I'm also so happy because so many of the times that we have shows, I'll either be interviewing with my co-hosts, a guest that I know and have trained with, or somebody who I've never heard of until the night of the chat, which is also cool. But tonight I'm so excited because Coach Rick Ellis is somebody whose videos I'm very familiar with. I've watched these, I've shared them. I was actually just chatting with a jiu-jitsu buddy of mine, and we've shared your videos back and forth. So, Coach, I just want to jump right in because you have called your YouTube channel The Art of Skill. And we talk about the martial arts and we talk a lot about the martial aspect because obviously that's needed, or else your stuff doesn't really fit under the umbrella. But the fact that there's an art to the skill, talk about that. What is the art of skill?
Thank you guys for having me. I'm honored. You know, that name came, you start brainstorming and thinking of ideas. And the concept that I had in mind was that at the highest level, skill is indistinguishable from artistry. And it kind of doesn't matter the domain. You can be a musician at the highest level. It becomes artistry. Everything's artistry at the highest level. A carpenter at the highest level, it's artistry. And so I just thought it was kind of cool, kind of a cool idea, the art of skill. And initially, what's funny is this channel, it wasn't supposed to be me. It was this business idea I had, sort of like masterclass.com, only for physical culture. And what I wanted to do was seek out the best of the best and create content with them and do all this stuff. And that was just a little too ambitious for where I was in my life at the time. And so I started doing, a few YouTube videos, just to get the channel going, and it started resonating, and then I started doing more, and here I am.
At what point do you think the skill blends into art? At what point do you think somebody has, is there, I know there was that 10,000 hours idea that was really popular. I think the author even retracted it a little, like the study wasn't 100% accurate, but
Yeah.
the idea is great and it's useful and it's motivating. So if somebody's out there going, because I love the way you say that, like, what a beautiful thing that you're through training skill, you can achieve artistry. Where does that come in somebody's path?
That's a great question, and I don't know if I have a good answer for you. You mentioned it, the 10,000 hour rule. And I think some people find it earlier than others, and I think some of it depends on the domain. But in martial arts, I think if you start real young, you probably will find that artistry fairly young.
Mhm.
There was a 16-year-old girl. I train at Clark Gracie's Academy these days, and there was a 16-year-old girl there recently who was I think she was the blue belt world champion at 16, and she was tapping out black belts. This girl, she was ridiculous. And she did it so effortlessly and beautifully. She would just float on people. She was a tiny thing and just finding the pockets, and it was true artistry.
Mm.
So I wish I had a great answer for you. I don't really know.
Yeah, I love it. It sounds like you're describing someone who's a little gifted.
Hmm.
Let's go
Yeah.
around the horn on this. Sensei Dauphin, let me start with you on this one. Um, do you consider art and skill to be one and the same, or do they separate at all? What is the art of skill, if you had to think about it?
It's a really provocative question. We all do martial arts, so that's in the name. So it's right there. It's right there for you, right? It's self-explanatory. The thoughts that are coming to my mind, Sean, as we're talking about this are things like, skill. When you have a skill and it's artistry, you take something to a level where you almost make it look like it's simple. Like people look at it and they're like, man, that looks easy. I could do that. Like I could get in there and do that. And then when they try and do it, they instantly are confronted by the fact that they're terrible at it, right? That they're not good at it, which is where everybody has to start, period. You have to start at the terrible spot. Yeah, and I think artistry comes when it's your whole being is involved in it, right? A lot of people do martial arts on a physical level. A lot of people can get into a good headspace or they got the guts to do it. But when you can really blend all three of those things together and blend them together for a really long period of time and make a commitment for yourself, I think that's what starts to make it look like people watch you and they're like, well, that looks pretty easy. I could do that.
Right on. There's a word I wrote down, ease, which we're going to come back to, but let's go to you, Sensei Suino. Where does art and skill collide or not collide, or one lead to the other? Where do you go with this?
Well, I think it's a big question, and so I'm going to go back to people that are more significant than I am. Miyamoto Musashi wrote about this, right? He said, "Seek the way in all things," and he was not only a great swordsman, but he was a great sculptor, a great calligrapher, and a philosopher. I think if you look deeply into everything, well, I want to revise that. You can't just look deeply. The key for what we do in martial arts is you have to train deeply, but also reflect on it. And I think when you do that long enough in enough different endeavors, you can begin to see the path. So I'm not sure that was an answer, but I think there's places we can go look for the answer.
Thanks,
I think
Sensei.
that was a great answer. Both of you guys had great answers. So keep talking. I'm listening.
This is our round the horn portion of the show. We love it just as much as kids. Hachi Legacy, what do you think about art and skill and where they meet or where they separate? Where do you want to go with this?
Well, that's a hard question to answer, personally, I think. But the only way I can come across that would be that, it's like martial arts at first. They were not martial arts. Somebody had an idea and they worked on it, trained hard on it. They got smarter at it. It became more efficient. And supposedly, if you do something and if you invent like martial arts, and you keep working at it and working at it, and then somebody else comes along and they pick it up and they see it and they like it, and then they improve it, and then it keeps happening, and then that service or whatever that is becomes 90% efficient. I would say that is an art, is that's what something that is like a classical art is supposed to serve you 9 out of 10 times. Nobody's going to be perfect at martial arts, but through working it and through working whatever else somebody invents, that's what I think. That's when thinking and working hard and being smart becomes an art.
Thanks, Hachi. I'm actually taking notes too, Coach Ellis. I had a student last night who's brand new first class and said, "What makes this karate?" And I was like, what a great first night question.
Yeah.
So I'm making little notes like, what makes something an art? What makes something? I don't want to add too much because I always add with my questions, but Sensei Dauphin, you and I once talked about the idea that, and I don't know what you think about this today, but this is like 25 years ago, just that when you train to a certain level, you'll be Zen whether you consciously think you're Zen or not. And I like that idea that no matter whether you think about it as an art or not, and this goes back to what you said, Coach Ellis, after a certain amount of training, it will be whether you describe it as that or not. You might think you're a crafts person, but other people look at it and go, yeah, that's more than just a craft you're doing. Let's pivot to another idea that came up in a lot of the answers. And I'll start with you again, Coach Ellis. First off, I want to say, I think one of the things that's so attractive, and Sensei Dauphin is going to do a more full introduction for you, but what I found so appealing about your videos and what I think makes people lean in, you have an ease the way you present. You don't push. You just, you know what you know. You don't know what you don't know. And you have an ease even tonight with the way you're speaking. And you use the word ease with regard to skill and with regard to training over time. And we are going to talk later about longevity and that kind of thing. But how important is ease? And how important is it to maybe not be easy for a while? Or do you start easy? Where does easy fit in with your training, your manner, your day-to-day? How important is ease?
Well, easy takes work to get there, right? If you're a white belt in jiu-jitsu, you're going to be smashed a lot. It's not easy on many levels, mentally, physically, emotionally.
Right.
But it does get easier. You pursue something hard and keep doing it, and you have small epiphanies. And I don't know if jiu-jitsu ever, or martial arts in general, ever gets easy. I mean, I guess it's relative, but yeah, I think over time, just with training, competence, confidence, answers, programming your body to have the answers it needs, and then it seems a little bit magical when it all kind of comes together. Whether that's easy or not, I'm not quite sure.
Thanks, Coach. Let's go to you, Sensei Suino. What do you think about how important is ease and where does it come into play? Early, later, never?
Later. May- um, I think when, when we're playing at our best, it feels easy and it feels like you can see everything that's happening, almost anticipate it. That doesn't happen often. And maybe it happens for other people. Maybe like Coach Ellis described, that 16-year-old blue belt. I suspect she's been at it a while and probably has some other gifts. Doesn't happen often for me, but it does happen. And it's a great feeling, but it's accumulation of a lot of work. One of my favorite things to say is, you don't know when you're going to have epiphanies, but if you're not in the game, you won't get any. So you train, and then if you're lucky enough to have a few minutes of ease in your training, that's cool. That's a great reward for the hard work.
Thanks, Sensei Sweeto. Hachi Legacy, let's go to you. How important is ease, and where does it start showing up, if ever?
When things become less challenging, like a good example would be Miyamoto Musashi. Had this thing with people on TV that were showing pictures of Toshiro Mifune, and they were saying he was Musashi. And then I put a picture of Musashi on that site, and they all withdrew their names. So he was just a simple, small. So he practiced so much that he became more efficient, and it was less challenging, and nobody ever could beat him. So that's the way I would look at it. Just constant practice and understanding, maybe another word.
Thanks, Hanchi. One thing I love that you've said twice tonight in both your answers is efficient. It's one of those words I like writing down around technique and skill and ease. Sensei Dauphin, where do you go with ease? How important is it? Where does it show up? Can it show up too early?
I don't know. It didn't show up too early for me, but so I'm not sure. But I would encourage people that if you do have too much ease in your life, you should go find something hard to do. That's what I've really enjoyed about being a 50-year-old going to BJJ is, and I'm not saying my other martial arts were easy. They're easy if you come to my club and you're like a new black belt or something. I'm going to have a certain ease about training with you. When I go to the BJJ gym, I don't have that. There's a lot of anxiety and tension, and I hope to find that same feeling again one day. And I know that the answers are just in the doing, right? The answers, you can't achieve that without doing it. I guess I'll rip off Suino Sensei by saying, in order to be great at something and get that ease, you first have to be willing to be terrible at it. And if you're not willing to be terrible, then you're not going to find that.
Thanks, Sensei. Yeah, some of you know I'm a big fan of road cycling. I just think those guys have grit going all the way back to like the early 1900s. They'll ride 300K sometimes. They'll break their collarbone and keep riding. And there's a great phrase in cycling: it doesn't get easier, you just go faster. I like that one. I use that as a motivator when I think I'm getting okay. It's like, don't stop. Let's do one more question and then we'll get to our intros. And I just want to start with you, Coach Ellis, because my favorite video of yours, I literally talked to my Sensei Dauphin this morning. We talk every Thursday that I'm in town and I'm available. And I said, I'm feeling ego about being 49 and slowing down a kiss and not moving the way I did when I was 25, even though my mind's better, my skill's better. And my favorite video of yours is called The Art of Longevity. I think it's the favorite of a lot of people's. So talk about, or the key to longevity, talk about what you consider the key to be. I mean, there are keys, I'm sure, but we're all over a certain age here, and everybody watching hopes to get to this age or already is. What do you consider the key to be? How does it keep going and keep getting better?
That's a huge question, and it sort of depends on whether you're talking about physically, nutrition, and lifestyle, and all those things. I mean, everything impacts it, of course. If you're talking about longevity and something like jiu-jitsu, I think it starts with your willingness to stay within your limits. And a lot of us think our limits are greater than they really are, especially if you're competitive when you're younger, you're an athlete in your youth, and in your mind, you're still that person. And, it's funny, sometimes I'll see myself, I'll be out somewhere in the mall or something, and I'll glance over and there's a mirror, and I'll see myself and I'm like, damn, I'm old, like, cause inside we all feel like that same person that we've always been. And so I think you have to stay within your limits, really suppress the ego, and understand that, you're going to get better day after day if you keep chiseling away at it, but you have to be healthy to get better. And, if you hammer too hard, you're going to get hurt or get broken or, so yeah, longevity, I think you have to take kind of a holistic view of your entire life and identify all those places in your life where maybe you're not being as healthy as you could be, because everything matters. Your sleep matters, your nutrition, your hydration, everything matters. When you get older, especially, it's the little things, the little habits that you have that are positive that are going to play a big impact, I think.
So I'm sure we'll get more specific if we get into this again throughout the show, and maybe some people ask questions about it. But the way you answered that, the way I heard it, or the way I need to hear it, is everything factors around your ego, because that's your ability. What do you consider your ego to be? And how do you keep your ego in check when there's been times where it's a really useful thing for us, maybe when we're younger?
Yeah, we all have to have an ego. People say, destroy your ego. You need some ego. You need some ego just to be the best you can be, right? You have to want it. And there's some ego in that. You think that, Michelangelo didn't, have ego about his artistry, so we all have ego. It's about controlling it and, just knowing, that ego destruction really has to happen every time you train, because every day you will have some struggles. I don't care if you're a black belt. I don't care how good you are. Every day is different, and some days you're going to struggle. And so every day you have to just kind of keep that ego in check and say, you know what, whatever happens on the mat, we're just training. I got tapped. It's fine. I didn't do so good tonight. It's fine. I had a great night. Don't over, inflate your sense of self. Try, sort of that middle path that I think we all have to walk. But you're absolutely right. The ego is kind of central to all that.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I'm not going to answer here, but for me, ego is anytime I'm above or below my sense of self. If I think I'm not as good as I am, that's ego. And if I think I'm too good, that's ego. It's basically distance from truth. And that's for me why I can't know the truth about my diet if I'm out of whack with what it was real today. Sensei Dauphin, where do you go? What do you define ego as, and how do you keep it in check? And how important is it maybe at certain ages or not?
I mean, ego is that thing that's going to push you sometimes in the right direction and sometimes in the wrong direction, right? If you're not conscious of what's pushing you. And I've been thinking a lot about it. I've had conversations with you about it, Sean. And Sensei Legacy and I have talked about this many times in my training with him. Sensei Suino and I most recently talked about it because when we were in Wyoming, there's a guy on this called Dan Holland. He was with us. And I started putting a tarp over top of a fire pit, like at about 10,000 feet up the side of this mountain. And Dan said, if you put the tarp there, it's going to melt. And Sensei Suino said, the tarp works for us. We don't work for the tarp. And I started thinking about that. That stuck in my head while I was hiking. And then I started thinking about all other kinds of things, right? Like the ego is not good or bad. It's how you use it that's good or bad. And I can apply that same thing. If the ego is working for you, it's probably good. If you're working for your ego, it's probably really bad. And that's where I take it.
Love that. Hanshi Legacy, where do you go with ego? What do you define it as? Is it important? Do we want to burn it down? How do we keep it in check?
Yeah, absolutely, yes. It is important. It's you can almost mask it in confidence, you know, because you have to be able. Everybody on the face of the planet thinks they're a little bit better than they really are, including martial artists. You know what I mean? So you have to have it. It sometimes it's driving for you, and the thing is, if you let it get away, like everyone is saying, but we mask it a lot with confidence, I believe.
Right on. Sensei Suino, ego, go.
I don't know that I have a lot to add. I think everybody said made some really good points. I think I love what Coach Ellis said about just, when you get on the mat, you just have to, you just train and you have to make sure that your ego doesn't get out of control. I probably suffered more from an ego that wasn't the same size as my abilities when I was younger. And I think life, especially a long life, educates you on that. And it's less out of whack as time goes on. It's part of our battle, isn't it? I mean, there's always somebody better than we are. And especially in the combatives, you can't pretend, right? If you're sparring with somebody good in karate, if you're doing andori with somebody in judo, if you're rolling with somebody in BJJ, you can't pretend. If they're better than you, you're going to find out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, like I said, my name's Sean Benson. I'm one of your hosts. If you're watching on YouTube in real time or later, we're so happy you're here with us. Please hit that subscribe. Please hit that like. Please share with your friends. We're so happy you're here. We were actually clocking some of our metrics, and we're actually doing nicely here. We're growing this thing, and people are digging it, but we love doing it. So we're so glad you're along for the ride. If you're listening on the podcast version, fabulous. Please bake us banana bread. None of us have any allergies, so you can make it rich and creamy. And if you're here on the Zoom call tonight, that's where we really are grateful, because you get to be a part of our living history. You get to ask any questions of the coach or of us in relation to the stuff we're kind of talking about. And we're really excited. So that I think Jesse's running the show behind the scenes. That chat button's going to light up, and you'll see where you can fire in your questions. And as I was fond of saying in the early days of this channel, if your questions are not rat shite, we might actually ask them. It's my pleasure to introduce my senseis and co-hosts. And, I just want to say that there's a circular nature of students here. Hanshi teaches us all karate, and Hanshi's a student of Sensei Suino Friaido, and that's the same for Sensei Dolphin. I'm everybody's student. And then Sensei Suino will have Sensei Dolphin teach karate at one of his events, etc. But I do want to point out one of my students who just got her purple belt. She does BJJ with me and Sensei Dolphin sometimes. And she goes, what's one of the coolest things for me? Seeing my sensei and his sensei looking in the same direction in class and being able to sit beside them. And I was like, I didn't reflect on that ever. But while this is specifically about me and you, Sensei Dolphin, I love the idea that we're often looking at our senseis, and it's really nice sometimes to be sitting beside your sensei as a student with them in class. So that's a real gift for me. We all do it with each other. And I just want to throw out that if you don't have that with your sensei, that's cool. But I consider that to be a real gift, that sometimes I'm looking at my sensei for instruction, and sometimes I'm sitting beside him as we both look for somebody way better than us to give us instruction. It's a real gift to just all be mashed up in this pond together. Sensei Dolphin, how you doing? And I look forward to our intro tonight.
Yeah, I like that, Sean. I like what you said. I'm really proud of the fact that when I got my Shodan in Iaido under Sensei Suino, I was standing on the floor next to Sensei Legacy while he was getting his Shodan at the same time together. We were doing that together. Many times my teachers bring me with them when they're going to their teachers, and yeah, I'm standing next to them while they're taking their lessons and I'm learning at the same time. So that is a really cool thing. But I am so excited to be introducing Coach Ellis tonight. I was already kind of gushing a little bit behind the scenes when he came on. I want to mention that he trains under the legendary BJJ instructor Roy Dean. He's another person that you should go check out his content if you haven't. And I would say Coach Ellis is really a chip off the block when it comes to the way he presents things in relation to his instructor. He loves nothing more than the spark of a new idea, one that's brought to fruition, and he has done a lot of that. He's brought a lot of ideas to fruition, especially something like BJJ that requires deep immersion. And when I tell you about some of the things he's done, Sean, you'll be nodding along, because I feel like you're kind of almost like the same person, just following an arc with Coach Ellis. He was a guitarist in the rock band called Nix Nix, and that played all over the Sunset Strip, just like Sean's band did in LA. He also sang and played guitar in a cover band called 50/50 at a bar in Cancun, Mexico for 3 years. So he lived in Mexico for 3 years doing music.
Man, you did your homework, brother.
I did.
I'm a little terrified. I'm a little terrified of what you're going to bring up.
Okay, well, listen, it gets better.
Please don't get to the jail part.
No, I'm
Oh,
not going to
boy.
do that. I'm not going to do that. But I did creep your social media. So
Apparently.
um, he is a music engineer and a sound designer for film and television. He worked on over 300 projects in Los Angeles, Europe, and Japan on some shows that you might know, like my kids know them for sure, like Toy Story and Pocahontas. And he's the first person that we've ever had on that actually is part of an Emmy-winning team. His team won an Emmy for their work on Oliver Stone's film, Assassination: The Last Days of Kennedy and King. So our first Emmy winner on the show. He's also like myself. He's a tech person, but he got into it at the beginning of the curve, and he eventually started a creative agency that designs websites for the entertainment industry. And you don't know this, Coach Ellis, but Sensei Suino runs a very successful marketing company that designs websites for people. So you have a lot in common.
Oh my God.
With this group of people.
Brother
Yeah.
from another mother.
Yeah. If you want to see some of the software he's designed, you can go on his GitHub page and you can see that. And I actually checked it out, and there's some really impressive software stuff there. So it's, you might want to go look at it at some point.
Will do.
And then at some point during all of the above stuff, like Sean Benson, he became a really high-end photographer, very good photographer. You check out his photography. It's really, really nice. And as we mentioned, he's a coach and black belt under Professor Roy Dean. Of all of his accomplishments, he says that that's the one that he's most proud of because it required the most dedication and perseverance. It took him 14 years, made harder by the fact that he started later in life, as did I and BJJ anyway. Another thing he did, he started his own jiu-jitsu school in Wyoming, the Art of Skill, which he doesn't have now because he's in California, but he still started it and it's still running. And the BJJ school wasn't the Art of Skill. I can't remember.
Third Way Jiu Jitsu.
Third Way.
I was actually there. I was there last week, actually.
Okay, well, we need to check that out sometime. But his YouTube channel is the thing where I first took notice of him. It's the Art of Skill. It's on YouTube. He just recently hit 50,000 on there. So we're really happy for that. But if we can help him get to 100,000 or 1,000,000, that's what we want to do because helping each other is really good. He travels and teaches all over. He's got a summit coming up, Old Grapplers Summit, and that's April 5th, 6th, and 7th. And if you want in on that, you better get in soon because he's just saying he's going to shut it down soon because a lot of people have signed up for it, which I like to hear that too. For me, I just want to say I love Coach Ellis's content. It has a really high production value and it's very educational and it's really super easy to consume. He has a great way of explaining not only the hows but also the whys, which is really good. And I want to point out something that I also really like is that I've noticed as I've watched literally like 50, 60 of his videos, some of the multiple times that he's a person who's willing to change his opinion. And I really like that about him. A lot of times in his videos, you'll hear him say things like, I used to think this, but now I think this. And I think that's a really cool thing. And I'm just super excited to talk to him. It's already been a great conversation. I'm really excited to talk to him more tonight.
Thanks, Sensei Dolphin.
You're
Coach
making me
Ellis.
blush, brother. You're making me blush. I appreciate it. I really appreciate it.
Well, we're really happy to have you. And like I said, we start the show with some broad ideas, but let's talk more about you. So talk as much about your young life, your growing up, and take your time to journey your way into what made you decide to become a martial artist. What was it like for you growing up and what made you find your way into a club?
I'm a creative at heart, I think, and it started real young. I started playing the piano when I was young, playing the guitar when I was young. I started playing in bands, and eventually that was my passion. That was my dream. I wanted to make it in music. Eventually, I would move on from that because, most musicians never make it big, and I certainly didn't. but I wanted to stay connected to music. So I went to engineering school. I got a degree in audio engineering, moved back to LA, got real lucky. Ended up at a busy production studio, recording studio that was doing a little bit of everything. They were doing post-production and music engineering and sound design and, orchestral recording and, just all kinds of stuff. So, and that was a great learning environment. Within about 6 months or a year of me being there, a couple of the main engineers quit, and I got kind of whisked into getting opportunities to do some big projects pretty early, maybe a little earlier than I was ready for, but that gave me a chance to kind of really get going in that career. I did that for about a decade, and I didn't mean to leave that career. I loved working in audio, and I'd probably love to still be doing it. But the industry was changing a lot, and I had discovered this thing called the internet. A friend of mine said, "Have you heard of this thing called the World Wide Web?" And I said, "No, what's that?" And he's trying to explain it to me. And I'm like, "What? I'm not quite sure what you're saying." But I went home and I got a modem, little dial-up modem, and got an Earthlink account. And instantly I fell in love with this medium. And, in the early days, websites were just static brochures. That's
Yep.
all they were. And my friends would say, "What are you doing on there? That's just boring." But I was like, no, this is the future. And I started learning it. I started, okay, how do you build websites? How do you do this? How do you do that? And that eventually led me to start a little side hustle because I had a lot of audio clients that wanted to get on the web. One of them was the TV show, The Highlander. I don't know if you remember back in the day.
Yes, love the Highlander.
The Highlander. I built their first website. And so that's kind of how it went. And I ended up, one of my clients was Nancy Sinatra, who was Frank Sinatra's daughter. And she needed a website. And more than that, she wanted a friend. And so she would, I'd go to her house, I get piles and piles of her music, her photos, and I'd go home and I'd scan them all. She wanted her whole life on the web. So I spent a year building this website for her. And eventually I was like, man, I got to empower her to manage her own website because she's driving me nuts. And I've got, I had a project in Japan. I had a lot of stuff I was doing. I just didn't have a lot of time for her. So I said, I'm going to figure out how to empower her to manage her own website. And then one night I discovered this thing called a blog. And that just changed everything. And there was Blogger. They're the ones that invented the genre. And there was a tool called Gray Matter. It was a very early tool. I'm getting into the weeds here, you guys. But so I said, I'm going to build something like that. So I bought a stack of programming books and I learned a programming language. I learned database programming. While I was in Japan working for Disney for 3 months, I would sit at the Hilton at night coding and trying to, create this product. When I got back, I installed it on her website and it changed her life. She was able to blog and do all this kind of stuff.
So
Eventually
I
that
want to
became
jump in there real quick, Coach, because I actually
Yeah.
do want to bring us back a little to martial arts. So let me ask you, and then I do want to go around the horn because blogging is so significant to what this show basically is, but also to what I think has been a real change in how the martial arts community can connect and talk to each other. So while I know you were a martial artist at the time, what effect do you think blogging and ultimately, therefore, YouTube has had on the martial arts?
Well, a huge impact. So, fast forward a ways and, UFC 1 comes along and I thought I have to learn that. But in 93, there's not a lot of places to go to do that. So it wouldn't be until I was living in Bend, Oregon that I started jiu-jitsu under Professor Roy Dean. And so you ask about YouTube. YouTube came around in, I think, 2006. And Roy Dean was an early adopter of that platform. He jumped in. I became his creative partner for a lot of, stuff, all his instructional courses. TJ, who's longtime black belt, he's a black belt now, longtime training partner. Sort of the three of us were the core of Roy Dean's media empire. TJ was the uke, the perennial uke. Nobody could take a judo throw better than that guy. And me doing the tech, doing some camera work and stuff. And it changed everything. I mean, YouTube has changed my life.
Right.
You know, without YouTube, who would know about me? You know,
So
nobody.
your teacher was an early adopter. So you felt the significance of the video blog slash blogs from basically video day one.
Yeah, very much. It's just, you know, so the same thing in a different medium, a different format.
Right on. So bring us then back to what then led you, while you're doing that work, into your first club.
You mean Jiu-Jitsu club?
Yeah. So if we jump backwards in time to where you're
Yeah.
working on your websites and you're developing your stuff,
Yeah.
keep going on that path for us.
Yeah. So, you know, I built this, I didn't mean to get out of audio again. I built this product, which was for Nancy Sinatra, and put it on the market. It started selling. And next thing you know, McGraw-Hill wrote a book about it and magazines covered it. And next thing you know, I'm in the software business. And so for 20 years, that was my business. And, you know, I consider everything I do creative. I'm creative at heart, and jiu-jitsu to me is a creative expression. And when I discovered it, it just captivated me in the same way that a lot of my other pursuits did. But jiu-jitsu was very different in that it's not just a mental discipline, it's a physical discipline as well. And I think that's what makes it so challenging in a way that some of the other things I've done haven't been. I have a tendency of getting bored when I kind of start mastering something, and I tend to go really deep into subjects when I get interested in something. So I tend to master things relatively quickly, and then I get a little bit bored, and then I want to move on. But jiu-jitsu has kept me interested, and maybe it's because we have to battle every night against somebody or multiple people, and there are always problems to solve. There's always something that you go home thinking, man, that didn't go so well. How can I solve that? And
So let's
so it's a
talk about
beautiful
that for a
combination.
sec. We'll come back to what got you in that club and how that felt. But this is something we know there's strategy in boxing. We know there's strategy in kickboxing and stand up. But this chess game concept within jiu-jitsu, I mean, I trained with 10th Planet out in Calgary, and the coach he calls it his math. He goes, I'm going to do some math tonight. And then he'll come home after winning a tournament, heel hooking somebody, and he calls it his math. What is it about jiu-jitsu that seems to, more than the others, attract the strategist, attract the person who doesn't want to get bored of problem solving?
That's a great question. You know, it's a funny thing because there's only so many ways to manipulate a body. Like the elbow only goes in one way, the wrist can go in multiple directions. You've got knees. You know, it's not that many ways to manipulate something, but yet there are hundreds of techniques in jiu-jitsu, and it's how you use your entire body against another person. And I think what makes it really addicting is the fact that your opponent might know everything that you know, and they're going to try to stop you from doing the things that you want to do, and you're trying to stop them from doing the things that they want to do. So there's a real, you know, exchange there that I think makes it far more interesting.
What about you, Sensei Dauphin? You train stand-up, you train jits. Do you find that problem-solving aspect is different? It doesn't make it a better art, but it might make it more specific or unique to that art.
Yeah, I don't know. When you talk about the problem solving, I think there's strategy, right? Like I take that in the direction of strategy. And I think, you know, if I'm gonna, in this instance, I'll rip off GSP. If martial arts is a pyramid, and I don't care if it's BJJ or karate or Muay Thai or judo, whatever it is, at your base, you have to have like a level of physicality. And then on top of that, you have to have your technique, your basics. And then that strategy or problem solving comes in at the top. And I think actually, I haven't experienced it a lot in BJJ yet. I
Right.
haven't experienced a lot of people who actually have good strategy outside of my coaches and black belts and people who've done it. But I think by and large, in most martial arts, people don't get to that level. They usually quit before they don't become problem solvers. That's an old man. And I don't mean that as age. I mean that as experience. Right? You've been in martial arts long enough to be a problem solver. I think your initial problems are just how to survive and learn more.
What about you, Sensei Suino? Do you find there's a difference on the ground versus standing in terms of that problem solving, that math, that chess game?
Yes, I think, well, I got there quicker, but, you know, I play BJJ at a comfortable pace, maybe an old man's pace, and I think that gives you the leisure to think strategically and tactically. I got there in stand-up judo, but that was after decades and decades. So they're both places you can apply strategy and you can apply tactics and tactical thinking, but uh, uh, the consequences in striking for me, striking moves too quickly for me to think that way, right? I'm always just in the moment, doing the best I can in a karate match, especially with you lunkheads. But uh, in stand-up judo, yeah, I'm good enough at it that I can reflect on what I'm doing while I'm doing it. And in BJJ, I'm not claiming to be good, but I'm claiming to play at a speed that allows me to think that way, if that makes sense.
That does make sense, and that's actually where I was going to go with it. Is just the exchanges can be slower, even if it's a killer exchange. So I can actually be consciously, even if I'm flowing, figure out, like, think. And I can't do that when, let's say, Sensei Dofan's rifling a punch at my chin. That's the moment to not think. And maybe I'm not good enough at BJJ yet. Now, Hanshi, I know you don't do the BJJ as much, but let's talk about, do people understand on a deep enough level how much strategy is in a stand-up type of engagement?
Are you speaking to me?
I am, yeah. What caliber of strategy is there that people maybe don't realize because they think they could just see red and swing a fist?
Oh no, no. Again, it's for the ease of it. You have to train so hard that I can't really make a call there because I've never rolled with anybody, if that's what you call it. But I can tell you by hearing stuff that uh, one of us was challenged to a confrontation between karate and their sensei. And that person's sensei was shocked and said to him, I never realized how fast karate really is. And he got his ass kicked. So I'm just saying that on the onset, karate finishes things in a quarter of a second. And where the other is something different that takes longer and more. So many things can happen. So what I'm trying to say, I guess, is that the longer you're moving around, the more of a chance you've got of getting hurt. So that's why karate accelerates finishes in as short a period of time as possible. Whereas jiu-jitsu, which again, I'm not clear of, I could be wrong, is that it takes longer to get what you want to get done. And if there is more than one opponent, then it becomes something else. If I'm wrong, I stand to be corrected.
Thanks, Hachi. Sensei Dolphin, let's go back to you.
Yeah, I just want to say that most of the strategies that I've learned from Sensei Legacy, a lot of people, they just never employ them in the striking game. Like, here's just a simple one I'll give everybody, and I'm only going to give you one because you have to earn the rest by coming and fighting. When Sensei would do, like, let's say he'd hit me with a back fist and we'd be fighting. So you become alive to that technique. And then you're alive to that technique. And then you sometimes respond to it, even though it's not coming, right? The body language dictates. So then you'll flinch or you'll raise your hand to block a technique that's not coming. And one thing he taught me really early on was, Randy, when you do that, when you flinch like that, reset yourself, move, change to a different position, because you've just given that person, you're kind of like their prey now. They've made you react the way they want you to react. And if you stay in the same spot, they're going to get you, like, with a high percentage. But if you move, they have to redraw their bead on you and figure it all out over again from a different spot. So that's just an example of a high level strategy in striking that a lot of people never do. They never get there, ever, never. They just try and go harder, faster, harder, faster, harder, faster.
Right. Let's go back to you, Coach Ellis. Thanks for going around the horn on that, everybody. I really like breaking these concepts open. Let's go back to you now and pick up sort of where we left off. and as you're approaching your way to walking into your first club?
Yeah, so I was actually training with some Taekwondo guys on Thursday nights. We're a small group of us. We're trying to learn jujitsu. We didn't have a teacher, and through a mutual, through one of my training partners in that environment, who was friends with Roy Dean, he invited him up to Bend to teach a little seminar to our motley little crew. And Roy was actually working as the sound designer in San Diego at the time. And so he and I hit it off.
Mm.
And he was talking about how he wanted to open a school. He was about to get his black belt. And I begged him, Jimmy, the mutual friend who connected us, he begged him to move to Oregon. And 6 months later, he did. So, Jimmy and I were literally his first students when he opened his school.
That's amazing. And so, wait, how long had you been doing Taekwondo? And was it
No, I
because
wasn't.
UFC one
No,
that
I
made
was.
you go, we need jits?
Yeah, I wasn't doing Taekwondo. I was actually, it was a group of guys that were trying to learn jujitsu on Thursday nights after hours at a Taekwondo school.
Got it, got it, got it.
Mhm.
So what made you
And
decide out of the blue at age 41 or 40 that you're going to meet a bunch of guys in Bend, Oregon on Tuesday nights and just muck around until your teacher appears?
well, I had wanted to start jujitsu ever since I saw UFC 1 in 1993. But, I was starting my audio career in those days, and and there just weren't a lot of resources for learning jujitsu the way now there is now. So I had to put it on the back burner. In hindsight, I was in LA, in Los Angeles. I could have been training with Jean-Jacques Machado, who is out in the San Fernando Valley. And, there are a couple guys out there, but I just didn't have time. And, I regret it now. I should have found the time. I could have started earlier. But finally, I was just in a place in my life where I had heard there was this group of guys at a Taekwondo school just strangling each other. And I thought, I'm going to jump into that. Now, if not now, then when? And I did.
That's amazing. So I lived in LA for 8 years, and my current LA instructor is Jean-Jacques Machado, and that's one of my
Oh,
regrets.
nice.
When I
Nice.
lived there, I didn't know about him or this art, and I could have been going up there 5 times a week in my 20s.
Yeah.
Instead, I decided to meet him in my 40s upon visits. So I can absolutely relate to that. That wishing while I was there earlier, I had maybe done a little more about it. So talk to us about him showing up, Roy Dean, and what that next little while was for you. And I know Sensei Dolphin has a question, so he'll chip in after a little bit on that.
Yeah, he opened a school, and when you're part of a brand new academy, there's an energy to it because the instructor, they're really excited about this new venture, and they put a ton of energy into that first generation of students. And I got to experience that when I opened my school that first year, because everyone's sort of at the same level and you can really bring everybody up in a real organized, cohesive way. Eventually it gets messy, and people come and go and it turns into something else. But what I remember most was just how special those early days was. And I've told this story before. In Japanese, there's the concept of the sensei, of course, but there's also the senpai, which are the senior students, which help transmit the knowledge for the instructor. And so by virtue of the fact that this was a brand new school, a bunch of us early guys became Roy's senpai.
Mm.
And most of those guys have gone on to become black belts in jujitsu. I can list probably 10 of those guys that ended up getting their black belts. And so I've always wondered whether there was something about being a senpai, even though we were just white belts at the time, we felt this extra responsibility for being part of this thing and helping, show the way to the white belts that had no stripes. You had two, right?
Yeah.
And but yeah, maybe there's something psychologically about that, being a senior student and just carrying on in a way that maybe you wouldn't if you're just a random student.
So I actually want to, I want to crack that open simply because of how many heads were nodding. So Sensei Suino, let's go to you. Whether you, I don't know if you use senpai in judo or not, but how important is that concept of being, a senior student, maybe even an early student within an organization, for getting people through the gauntlet?
Yeah, that's an interesting observation. I'm gonna have to reflect on that and see if sort of the first cadre of people at my various dojos have gone on to be more successful. I'm not sure about that. It's an interesting thing to think about, but I will say that when people start taking ownership of not just their own training, but the training of the people that come after them, that does seem to add longevity and seriousness to their career. So, yeah, I mean, 100% we use the term senpai in all the Japanese arts. And, yeah, I'm fascinated by that. So I'm going to think about it. That's what I got for you.
Right on. Hanshi Legacy, let's go to you next. How much do you think being a senior student, maybe even in the early days of a club, means you're probably going to stick around a little more than someone else? Do you think that's a real thing?
Oh, yes, I would think so. And then, they begin to feel like the driving force, like you guys in my dojos, like you start becoming the driving force, not just one person. And, in a way, the bigger the wave, the more work gets done, right? And then more minds, more different ways, growing faster, growing larger, minds of likeness, that idea. Absolutely, yes.
Thanks,
Because
Hanshi.
things have to evolve, and they have to evolve from me and then from you. And so things have always be moving forward, or your time in the martial arts, if you don't do that, your time in the martial arts has failed. It hasn't passed during my time properly.
Thanks.
I need you guys.
What about you, Sensei Dolphin? Where do you go with this?
I think it's really important to have responsibility, especially for something that you're passionate about. And I think being a senpai, I want to digress just for a second, Coach Ellis. I also like the fact that Professor Dean is a black belt in Aikido as well. So I like when I watch his videos and your videos that there is a strong connection to Japan still. You can feel it, like when everybody's talking. But so going back to, I think you need a sense of responsibility. For me, I remember I was a good senpai to some and a bad senpai to others. Because I was a bit extreme when I was younger with my temperament, and better now, I hope, like much better now. But I always had senpai that were good examples and ones that were bad examples. And we know the ones that are bad examples, and some of the ones who are bad examples are still in karate and they've become better, right? Because they had a sense of responsibility, but they were exerting their authority through their ego instead of what was good for martial arts and the dojo as a whole. But I think it's important to have those.
Thanks, Sensei. Yeah, I just want to add, I was Sensei Dolphin's only student for a couple of years, and I didn't need that egoically, but I needed to be accountable. And what you said, Coach Ellis, if I could have faded into a club where I was just one of the students and I was living in Toronto, an hour and a bit away from him, I don't know if I'd have lasted. But knowing I was, let's say, the brown belt when he was a black belt and adding other students, I did feel a sense of responsibility, not just to show up, but to show up well with like stuff I trained since I last saw him. So for me, I'm not saying I would have quit, but I'm not saying I wouldn't have if I didn't have that responsibility. So let's get back to how you go from being in Bend, Oregon. You got this club, you're moving up through the ranks. How's that going? And at what point do you decide that you're either going to move or start a new club? Where does that all go for you?
Well, I've been a little nomadic throughout my life, and that started real young. My mother was a nomad, and we moved a lot when I was a kid, just, and just career-wise, I had some moves, and so, at some point, my then wife wanted to move to Hawaii, and I said, sure. I had a successful software company, and it was a virtual company. I could live anywhere. And so we moved to Maui for a year, which was great. I was a fresh purple belt when I showed up in Maui at Luis Heredia's Academy. Luis was one of Rickson Gracie's first black belts. He came to the United States with Rickson. And so it was for me, it was a lot of fun to train in an environment where it was certainly a tougher environment than what I had come from, because the Hawaiians love to fight and they're the nicest guys in the world. They'll hug you, but when it's time to bump fists, holy cow, they'll come at you hard. And sometimes I'd call Roy after training. I'm like, I don't know, man, I might quit. No, you'll figure it out. But after a year in Maui, I got a little bored, and we ended up in Florida for a while. We ended up in Maine for a while. We're just kind of nomadic, and which jiu-jitsu wise was a lot of fun, because I got a chance to train with a guy named Alexi Cruz, who was Ricardo De La Riva's first black belt. I got a chance to learn from a lot of different really, really skilled people, all of them with a different technical influence, different philosophy, different, kind of way of doing things. And I think it was good preparation for me when I opened my school, because I had a lot of influences. Roy has been my dominant influence without a doubt. In fact, the way I teach, the way I think about jiu-jitsu, the way I, think about technique is very, very influenced from him for sure. But you add stuff here and there, and then use those influences to transmit knowledge. Ended up in Wyoming just because my ex wanted to be closer to her family. Her father had been sick and he ended up passing away, and she wanted to be closer. And so we ended up moving out there, and there was no jiu-jitsu there. So I saw an opportunity and said, okay, I guess someone's got to be the man. And I had a kind of existential crisis for about 10 minutes thinking, do I want to be the man? I don't know if I want to be the man. Especially because, Laramie, Wyoming is a college town, and they've got a wrestling program. And I'm just imagining all these wrestlers coming in the door, and I'm thinking, oh man, I'm in my 50s. Do I really want to do this? And, but it ended up being incredible. It was great for my own game. It was great for me to learn the art of teaching. I'm lucky that I always got opportunities to teach, even going all the way back to when I was a blue belt. Roy, when you have a new school, sometimes you have to lean on those young students to help you on occasion. And then as a purple belt, I got a chance to teach full time for 6 months because the coach had injured himself that I was training under. And so I really discovered that I love to teach, and I'm reasonably good at it. And so I saw an opportunity and opened a school in Wyoming.
I want to put a pin in that, because I just wrote down, do I want to be the man ? Which actually relates to a question that came in, but we're going to get to that after we do your 10 questions. So the 10 questions is something we ask all our guests, and we ask that you answer as impulsively as you can, but then feel free to break open that answer and elaborate if you wish.
Wow.
What is the most effective move in your martial arts arsenal?
In mind, that changes over time. And you guys have probably experienced this in your own journey, that you'll discover something that you need at that stage of your development. And sometimes it's the thing that's going to save you, or it's the thing that gives you a little bit of success. You go from no success to a little bbit of success. But then eventually you're not in those positions anymore, or eventually you're able to, you're able to stop people earlier in the equation, which means you're not in the position where you have to use that thing, or you're able to, offensively go somewhere else. So, and I think it's also part of my nature in that I'm an explorer by nature. And so I tend to, get a little bored when I'm using the same technique over and over and over and having a lot of success with it. But if I had to talk about my game today as constituted, my side control game is my most productive game. That's where I can really dominate people. I have a stifling side control. If I can get there, I can give just about anybody a really hard time. I've got a really good bread cutter choke. I've got a good arm bar on either side. I can hit, the near side arm bar if I'm on the same side. The triangles are always good. I set them up a little differently. I end up, I use those sometimes to put people on their side, and I'll finish it from the side or finish the arm from there. My sweeps are decent. the game when you're older is incremental, and you bump fists with someone, they come at you at 100%. A lot of times you're starting from a defensive position because you can't match their intensity or their pace, or they just get a jump on you or whatever. So I think a lot of times, I'm just starting from disadvantaged positions. So I'm very, very comfortable from disadvantaged positions. I think I have a very tough defense to crack. And I try to be patient and wait for that moment to reverse the position, get on top. My guard passing is decent, but really side control, I think, is where I love to play mostly.
I love side control too. I prefer it to mount. Who's the most influential martial artist in your life?
It'd be Roy Dean, without a doubt.
Who do you think is the most influential martial artist of all time, and why?
Wow. Well, Kano, maybe. I mean, isn't that where all this stuff came from? At least on the grappling side of the equation.
Right on. What excites you most about the next 5 years of your training?
What excites me is that I feel like I'm on this path that I didn't expect to be on. I thought that I was going to retire as a tech guy and then kind of fade off into the sunset and do jujitsu for fun. But I ended up having to shut that company down, and some things happened, and that turned out to not be my retirement. And then this little YouTube channel turned into a thing, and now I'm doing this event down here in San Diego, and I'm being asked to do more of these events. And I've got, I'm doing a seminar in the Netherlands. I'm heading to Europe with Roy Dean, and I've got all these things going on now. So I think the next 5 years should be really interesting. I'm curious to see how it all plays out.
Right on. 5 years for the explorer is a long time.
Yeah.
If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you get there?
Wow. I need a drink for that. Let me in, please. I hope he says that I treated everybody the way that I want to be treated, and I think I was a conscientious person that I think doesn't try to take advantage of people, that I've lived a good sort of noble life, I hope.
Right on. Do you have a favorite film and television martial artist, even if they're not maybe great at martial arts, or maybe they are?
Oh man, I mean, Bruce Lee, I think he's the original, right?
Is there a martial artist, living or dead, in all recorded history who you'd want to train with the most?
Oh man. Wow. I'd love to go back in time and train with Rickson Gracie when he was young, and maybe be part of that whole thing. But I mean, there's so many great martial artists. Boy, that's a tough one. It would be fun to train with a lot of different people.
Mm-hmm. pkcc is, I'm sure, on a lot of people's lists.
Yeah.
If everyone in the world could have the greatest benefit you've gotten from martial arts, whether they train or not, what benefit would they be getting?
What was the first part of that question?
If everyone in the world could have the greatest benefit you've gotten from martial arts, what would it be?
Wow, man, it's martial arts has changed my life. Wow. I mean, it's not even about self-defense. It comes to a point where that's kind of the least of the benefits. There's so many profound benefits you get from jiu-jitsu, the health benefits, the calmness, the dynamic problem solving, the suppression of the ego, the understanding of how skilled you are in relation to other people. You're kind of a reality check that you don't have if you don't train martial arts. You walk around thinking you're a badass when you're not. Man, there's so many benefits. How do you pick one? Boy, I mean, can you do one? I'm not sure.
All right, I'll go with what you just said, the reality check.
Yeah, the reality check. Maybe
that's what I teased out of that.
Yeah, that could be, that could be a good one, because honestly, I think truth. We're all seeking truth. And I think that a lot of people, um, they're not truthful with themselves. You're truthful about yourself, about your own nature, about, yourself. And in martial arts, you can't hide the truth. You can't walk through the world with an inflated sense of yourself the way you can in the real world, because you're only as good as you are. And every day on the mat, you have to prove how good you are again. It's never ending.
Yeah. Love that. Love that teased out response from your answer. Our last two questions come as a pair, Coach. What is your greatest achievement and what is your greatest regret?
Boy, bro, that's tough. My greatest achievement. I mean, there's a lot of ways to think about that. My children and things like that, of course, but um, probably my black belt. I would have to say, I built a software company. I've done interesting things in my life, but I didn't have to work at those things nearly as hard, and it didn't take nearly as long. But something about jujitsu is, it's tough, it's difficult, and it requires perseverance and dedication and all those things. And eventually, with enough training, you get there. So probably that.
Greatest regret?
Greatest regret. Well, my martial arts regret is not starting much younger. Had no idea how much I would love martial arts. If I did, I would have started when I was a kid. And
Anything non-martial arts you want to touch on, or should we leave it there?
oh boy. I made some mistakes in my business that I regret, and it cost me dearly. It cost me a lot of money. And yeah, I have some, life's messy and there are always things to regret. But, honestly, I don't look back at my life and feel regret over anything, because at some point you have to move on. We all make mistakes. We all screw up. We all, hit lows, but you can't wallow there. You have to, at some point, move on and say, whatever. And the person I am today here is a byproduct of all those things that happened to me in life. So I don't really have regrets, honestly.
Right on. Thanks for those 10 questions.
Thank you.
Let's pop back. Do I want to be the man? And this actually ties in nicely with Sensei Sydney Dauphin, Sensei Dauphin's daughter and a black belt in our club. And she asked, how does the panel, we'll start with you though, Coach, feel rank is different from responsibility in the dojo? Does more rank always equal more responsibility? So does rank equal responsibility, Coach Ellis?
No, not necessarily. Plenty of people have rank that have no responsibility within the dojo. Of course, there is some underlying responsibility in that you need to be an ambassador for your sensei and, an ambassador in that lineage, and comport yourself in a way that's, honoring that. But, a lot of people just train and then they go home and they don't really feel any sense of responsibility there. But there should be a sense, the way I described it, there should be a sense that you're carrying on something special, and you should, do that to the best of your ability, and try to, lead by example.
Thanks, Coach. Hanshi Legacy, let's start with you this time. Do you think more rank equals more responsibility necessarily?
I personally think yes. If you get to that rank and you start to understand things, there are other things besides, like you have to be more responsible for your actions so that you're really not hurting anybody. But that's just on a physical level. Your actions, your duty, and your practice, so that you at least stay the same level at it, or keep going, and making sure that the art survives. Because again, like I'm saying, the time for martial arts right now is our time. And if we let it fall down, we let it weaken, we have duties and responsibilities that in this modern day, we're now in charge of the arts. If we let them fall to the ground, it's our fault. So that's my take on that.
Thanks, Hanchi. Sensei Suino, more rank, does it equal more responsibility?
Generally, of course it does, because, every white belt is looking at depending on how your ranking system goes, let's say every white belt is looking at the brown belts to see how to behave and how to do techniques, and the brown belts are looking at the black belts. At least I think that's true in a dojo with a good culture. But every increased rank doesn't yield responsibility in the sense that not everybody's designated as a leader or an instructor. And there are definitely people that are good at the martial arts or who just hang around for a long time who aren't great leaders or necessarily good role models. And if you're in charge of a dojo, you don't put those guys or gals into a position of responsibility. So yeah, rank is different from responsibility, but not completely divorced from it.
Right on. Thanks, Sensei. Sensei Dofan?
At least in my time in martial arts, responsibility has always been built into the rank by my teachers. For me, just an example would be if you come into my dojo and the white belts are not tied properly, I don't say anything to the white belts. I go over to the brown belts and say, why do the white belts not have their belts tied properly? So when you're getting a brown belt in my club that you have some responsibility and a duty to the other students. If the dojo is not clean, I'm going to go to the brown belts and say, why is the floor dirty? And they're going to say, because I didn't do my job, Sensei, right? And then there'll be some repercussions for that. But one thing we're not talking about is I would say there is some pressure that comes with rank, which maybe leads to responsibility. Like Coach Ellis just said, you're only as good as you are and you have to prove it. I think that comes along with rank, right? Like I like to think if you come to my dojo and we do stand up together, you're going to find me to be a 7th dan. I like to think that. I'm sure there's better 7th dans than me, but I think I'm in the running. Like if they come and move around with me, they're going to say, yeah, this guy, he's earned that rank. That is a bit of a responsibility when you have that rank. You have to live up to that standard and that level of achievement. So that is a responsibility. And as Coach Ellis said, like I always want to be a good reflection of my teachers, like period. Like I don't, if I go to my lowest rank right now, BJJ blue belt, when I wrap that around my waist and go out onto the floor, I want to be a good representative of what our club and what a blue belt is in that community.
Thanks, Sensei. Yeah, you did ask the panel said, I'll just say very quickly, to me, it does. To me, rank absolutely equals responsibility, to me personally, and to me within the flow of the club. But in my jiu-jitsu club, like there's black belts who they show up, they train at other clubs, they don't teach, they never want to teach, they train hard, they're good people, but they don't have any hugely integrated sense of, and I'm going to help perpetuate. They just like to train. And I think that's valid. It's just not how I want to do it. So I think, you can do it any number of ways, but a Sensei Open taught me water speaks its own level. Go again, head coach.
No, that could be the kind of the philosophical difference sort of between the Brazilian viewpoint and the Japanese, which is much more hierarchical and all that. There's a casualness to Brazilian jiu-jitsu that is not present in Japanese arts, obviously.
It's funny you say that because I when I got my purple belt and some of my students had trained with Sensei Dofan's coach, and I called my coach, I was like, is it okay if I show some of my students who've been walked through the door? And he goes, I'm gonna stop you right there. This ain't karate. Be safe. You have a ton to show them. Have fun. Like that was it. There was no need to check. And and he's from Brazil. It was very much that. It wasn't the same type of thing. And I do like both, but I needed the one I started with for sure. Let's go to a question that my friend Tamir texted me. He's the one I told you I share a lot of the videos with. Secondary black belt in karate, 51-year-old blue belt who's going through a major shoulder injury right now. Getting some PRP, doing that thing, and it's been frustrating. And he just basically said, real excited you got him as a guest. Basically, can you talk about recovery protocols while still training, what that
Yeah.
looks like, because that's something we're all fighting against.
That's tough, man. I have a dislocated clavicle at the moment. My shoulder's all jacked up, and I've had a torn rotator cuff and a blown disc in my back, and lots of injuries over the years. I think with training and experience, you develop a pretty good sense for when you're hurt and when you're injured, because I think they're different. And you develop a sense for how to navigate that, sometimes more successfully than other times. I've always tried to train through injuries. I'm, taking a couple weeks off for this, but only a couple weeks, and I'll get back at it. And then, figuring out how to modify the things that you're doing in order to continue to keep training through that. But that could be a little bit risky. You have to have some risk tolerance to be able to do that. And I don't have a good answer other than you need to learn your body and really understand, maybe how you're playing the game of jiu-jitsu and what are your patterns and how does your injury fit into those patterns and what you can do to maybe not do that. I have a friend that had to have his jaw reconstructed, and so he played leg locks for like a year straight, and he's a phenom now with the leg game. So, sometimes just changing it up, you can't use your arm, your shoulder. Well, I'm going to, use my legs more. I'm going to just try to play with my legs and no arms. Like you make these games for yourself that let you develop attributes and aspects of your game, while the other thing is convalescing.
Right on. I really appreciate that answer with my pop floaters right now.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to apply that on Saturday and see how Saturday goes. Let's talk though about your path. You've got the club, you're training in Wyoming. But what led to what you're considering the surprise YouTube success? Talk us through that journey.
Well, I started making YouTube content. Initially, again, I had this bigger idea that was going to be a video, kind of a streaming video service site thing. But ultimately I didn't have the resources for that. And I made some initial content just to have something on the YouTube channel while I spun up this idea I had. And what surprised me was the response. People started really resonating with my videos. And when I realized that I didn't have the resources to do the big idea, I ended up just I didn't do any YouTube content for like a year. I had just a few videos on the channel, and I didn't even look at the YouTube channel. And then one day I logged in and I had like 6,000 subscribers, and I literally hadn't done anything in a year. And I said, okay, I think there's something here. And I did a video. I think it was how to do jujitsu when you're old video. And that thing blew up. It got, 100,000 views very quickly. And I thought, okay, there's something here. Even though as an introvert, I've said this many times, I'm not entirely comfortable being the protagonist of my own reality show. But, based on the feedback I get, and, it seems like I'm touching people's lives a lot of times. And, it feels amazing to hear those stories and, get the feedback I get. So, yeah, and it put me on this path that I'm on now. So I owe a lot to it.
I love that. And Sensei Dauphin has a question, but a lot of times I'll go to bed earlier than my fiance and just spiderweb on YouTube. And that's how I came across your stuff. It was suggested for me because of all the other JIT stuff I follow. And within 3 sentences, I'm like, I'm watching this vid. And so I'm not sure, I can't tell you other than, like I said, I really enjoy your easy manner, but there's just something that makes me go next sentence, next sentence, next sentence. And it's, I get why you woke up to 6,000 subscribers. Sensei Dauphin?
My question is just about the art of skill in your logo. My wife and I have a tattoo. I have a dragonfly with an infinity symbol, like with some dots for our children. I just wonder why you chose, like in Japanese culture, the dragonfly has a lot to do with martial arts, and I just wonder why you chose that logo.
I was just looking for something that represented sort of the ultimate artistry, and dragonflies are some of the most badass creatures on the planet. I believe pound for pound, they're the fastest flying creature. They're like helicopters. They can hover in all dimensions. They are they intercept their prey, which insects don't do that. Only birds of prey, like hawks and falcons and eagles. So most insects follow, birds of prey intercept, and dragonflies intercept. And so there's a whole, and I'm forgetting a whole bunch of things about dragonflies that are super cool. Their vision, I just think they're cool. So I just thought, that's a cool idea.
Well, let me tell you something about the dragonfly that I think you will think is cool. It can't move backwards. It can only move forward. So it can move sideways and all those things, but it can't go backwards. It never moves backwards. So that's why I really like it, because it moves forward.
Interesting. That is good.
Yeah.
There's a metaphor there.
Yeah.
There's definitely a metaphor there. I love that. And especially with the sideways capability.
Mm-hmm.
Coach, before we talk about your Grappler Summit, the old Grappler Summit, is there anything else you want to touch on that we haven't gotten to? Because the one thing we never talked about before is how fast this time flies. But is there anything that you're like, oh, make sure we talk about this, or do you want to tell us about that summit?
No, I mean, that's the big event in my life right now. That's the next big thing I'm doing. And it's, an idea I had based on all the feedback I get from older grapplers who look at me as someone who's maybe leading the way toward, an ancient age. But so I thought I'm just going to do an event down here in San Diego and see how it goes. So I came up with the idea and advertised it, and it's almost sold out now. It's a 3-day event in San Diego for the over 40 crowd, and we'll be doing more of them. I'm pretty sure, based on the response that we've gotten. I think it's got legs.
What curriculum are you use, Coach? Are you keeping that as a secret, or do you have some curriculum that you want to crack open?
I'm working on that as we speak, and I think we're gonna look at defense is going to be a big part of it, being comfortable in disadvantaged positions, maybe pre-positioning, getting yourself into positions that let you survive those worst case scenarios and give you a reasonable chance of escaping, kind of that in-between game. Everybody in jiu-jitsu will teach a side mount escape from the worst case scenario or a mount escape from the worst case scenario. But rarely do they teach kind of that in-between game. What happens when someone has passed the guard and they're on their way to flattening you out? And if you can pre-position yourself properly, then it's much, much easier to survive. And so I'm kind of big on that. So that'll be a big part of it. Maybe some how to play a more pressure-oriented style of offense, because as you get older, you don't have those explosive movements that you can keep redlining yourself doing. So you have to have a more incremental game. We think of jiu-jitsu as being these distinct positions: mount, back, side control, guard, half guard. But I tend to, and the longer I train, the more I start thinking of these positions as many more sub positions even within that position. So side control, I think of as several positions. You can play the corner, you can play near the hip, you can, go more north, more south. So, exploring some of those ideas, maybe we'll do a little bit of flow training. Maybe I think I'll introduce a few ideas like how to breathe properly, which is something I'm learning how to do, and I'm getting better at it. Some recovery stuff. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm putting it together now.
Amazing.
And one last question, minute or less, before we go round the horn and talk about our night with you, and then you'll have one more chance to take us out. What do you, I talked about why I might at midnight be like, love this video. What do you attribute this thing to? What do you attribute why people are interested in your videos? I know I'm asking you to be talking about yourself maybe more than you want to, but B, why do you think so many people are so interested in this grappling over 40 all of a sudden?
Well, I attribute the grappling thing to guys like Jocko and Joe Rogan and others who have kind of proselytized jiu-jitsu and spoken about it so much that I think there's a lot of public awareness about it. And, combat sports, the UFC, those sorts of things. So I think even the casual person today has some familiarity with jiu-jitsu. and, people are realizing they can start at any age. That's one aspect of it. The other is, you're getting guys that have grown up, doing jujitsu from a little earlier age. They're getting older now. And so there's a much bigger pool of people.
Sure.
What was the first? I went backwards. What was the first question?
What do you attribute why you're getting some success out of it?
Why am I getting
a crack at it?
Man, I don't know if I'm the best guy to answer that question. I don't know. I think that, I bring a lot of, I've done a lot of things in life, and I come from the world of audio production, and there's a certain artistic sensibility that I think that I bring to it that people resonate with. But I mean, I don't know. I'm probably the worst person to ask that question. Why do people like me? I have no idea.
Yeah, I get that. We're here working to grow a channel as well. So I'm asking very selfishly, like, give us your secrets. And,
if I had a secret, I think it's find topics. Yeah, I'm trying to do something a little bit differently, I think. You have to find something that is unique enough that you can sort of stand alone in that category. There's an old marketing principle, which is that if you can't be number one or number two in your category, you need to find a new category or redefine your category so that you can be number one. And so for better or worse, I'm kind of known as the old guy that does jujitsu. I've sort of latched onto that. And it's funny that, Danaher has his old man course now, and Bernardo Faria is talking a lot about the older grapplers now. And like some people I think are starting to pay attention to that and realize that there's a market there. And so maybe that's it, that I've sort of, established my brand that's, a little bit uniquely, I guess. I don't know.
Right on. Thanks for that. Really appreciate that. And being able to tell you what my actual motive is. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to say thank you to Robert Schlumsky, Justin Shea, Andrei Sedyshev, Alden Adair, Jesse Vlay-Vitao, Sydney Dauphin, Josh Kitchens, Christiana Landolt, Daniel J. Holland, Dridi Giuliani, and Stavros Stavroulias for running the show behind the scenes. We can't thank them enough, but we try. And we don't have this show and everything that you see out there promoting each episode without them. So thanks to them. Coach, what we do when we go at the end of our shows, we go around the horn, starting with Hanchi Legacy, and we each say a little something about our time with you. And then the last word will go to you. So Hanchi, what do you want to say about our time tonight with Coach Rick Ellis?
Well, I found it to be a very good time and very interesting. It's nice to see how you got to be successful in the martial arts at a later age.
Mm-hmm.
And it's maybe even think about trying that, even though I'm almost 80. But I mean, I would like to be able to see what you are all talking about. So maybe I'll ask Randy to
come to San Diego, brother. Come to San Diego. We'll train.
Yeah, well, anyway, that was really great. I'm also really interested in talking to you about Wyoming, but we'll do that maybe some other time. Thank you very much for coming on our program, and it was a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you.
Sensei Suino, what do you want to say about our time tonight?
Loved it. This was a deep dive, a deep roll into BJJ conversation, probably more extended than we've had. Thank you so much, Coach. Really enjoyed the peripheral stuff, the brief chats we did about nutrition, about how to roll as an older person, how to roll when you have an injury, stuff I'm thinking about a lot. I don't know how far you are into that dislocated clavicle. I'm about 4 years out from a bilateral dislocation. It does heal. It sucks. I went to my chiropractor weekly and had him put it back in place for about 9 months after the injury, and it's unattractive but functional at this point. So there's hope. Maybe you knew that.
Yeah. I hear it takes a long time. I have a friend who dislocated it. He said 8 months. It hurt for 8 months. So
yeah, that's about right.
I don't think it hurts me to train. I think I can muddle through. If it's just pain, I can deal with that. So, but yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much for coming on the show, and I certainly hope we get a chance to roll sometime.
I appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you, Sensei. Sensei Dauphin?
Suino Sensei said unattractive but functional. I thought he was describing me.
There's a lot of people on this call like that.
Coach, I write lots of notes. One thing I'm surprised, since we have these types of conversations where there's these little sidebars that we never get deep into. We often talk about, we do shorts and topic based. I think if you have time, it would be great to come back and like, I can think about like, how do you roll when you're injured, or the topics on your YouTube videos, we could crack into a bunch of those. So we'd love to have you back again if you have the time and are willing.
Yeah, I would love to.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I liked when as soon as we started, when Sean asked the question, what is the art of skill? And you said everything at the highest level is the art of skill. It becomes artistry. I also like that you said easy takes work, right? I write these things down because I promise you, when I talk to you again, I'm going to be building on these lessons that you provided in my brain.
Wow.
Ego has to be destroyed every time you train. I love that. And if it isn't destroyed, then you're probably got one foot at the door and the other on a banana peel. Have you heard about this thing called the World Wide Web? That's a good quote. I like that. Man, these boots are made for walking. You made a website for Nancy Sinatra. That's really cool. McGraw-Hill, a lot of people don't know what that is, but that's a publishing company, and you did a tech book for them, and I'm going to go search that out. I think it's really cool that you heard about some guys strangling each other, and then you went to a Taekwondo school where they weren't doing Taekwondo. You went after hours because you didn't want to do that one. You wanted to do the thing.
And they weren't even doing jujitsu, my friend. They're who knows what they're doing. It was ugly.
Right. But still, when the student's ready, the teacher appears, and then Professor Dean showed up for you, and the rest, as we say, is history, right? I like when you said, do I want to be the man, when you started your club in Wyoming? Do I want to be the man? I like that one. And that when the one coach was injured, that opportunity provided you this thing, and you learned that you love this thing, which is teaching. Effective move, side control. My coach is always saying, as a smaller person, Randy, don't try and get to mount. Use side control. The big guy's just going to bench press you off over and over again. Side control is much better. No surprise that Professor Roy Dean is your most influential. I like that you said Kano for, Master Kano for most influential of all time. And really, your next 5 years, that's such an honest answer, right? Like, you never thought you would be here, so you're just excited to be doing this thing for the next 5 years. And building on it too, right? Scaffolding it. God, a noble life. I think he'll tell you that. You said Bruce Lee for TV and film. When I was going to Japan last year with Suino Sensei, I watched Enter the Dragon one more time as I was on the airplane. Man, I'd like to train with Rickson Gracie too, or even just meet him, quite frankly. And it took us a while, but getting to the reality check, the greatest benefit is a reality check. And in my mind, it went to, because in martial arts, there's consequence. And so you need that reality check, and that consequence gives you that reality check. I'm really happy that you just simply said your greatest achievement is getting your black belt. It is a great achievement. That is a great achievement. People who really get a black belt have reached deep into martial arts. It's not easy, and it shouldn't be easy. And I had this strong feeling you were going to say that your greatest regret was start sooner. It's been so awesome to talk to you. This met and exceeded all my expectations. I really look forward to talking to you again.
Likewise. Yeah, likewise. You guys are great. And man, you'd go around, and every answer I heard, I was like, oh man, that was way better than my answer. Oh no, his is better than my answer.
Come on.
You guys are great.
It was really good, Coach, to have you on. I'm going to be watching and rewatching your content, and I have just one humble request. Please keep making more content. Keep pushing it out there. Yeah, you have people right here on the call that if we can ever help you or collaborate with you, we're happy to. If you look at our channel and you see guests we've had, or we're not selfish and we don't hold things in here. If we can help you, we want to.
Yeah, back at you. Yeah, we're all just here to make ourselves better and help each other. So yeah, absolutely.
Sensei, I just want to say real quick, it's funny because I wrote down in really big letters black belt, because I think we gloss over sometimes what that does mean and can mean. And I think we're privileged enough to be able to take it for granted sometimes. And it's not something to take for granted. And I think this show is a nice reminder of what a deep accomplishment that is. And Sensei Dauphin mentioned the shorts that we do, and whether we do that with you or not, I'd love to. I felt like every single thing we touched on could have been a whole show. Want to talk about nutrition? We could have done a whole show on that, going around the horn. Felt like we could have done it with all the things we got to, and that's a testament to just how much we were really talking about. So thanks for that. And I do go to LA a lot, and if it's cool, I'd love to hit you up and come do some rolls with you and learn from you. Popping down to San Diego would be real easy for me and real fun.
Yeah, I love that. I've had that happen many times. When I had my school, especially, people would be driving down I-80 cross country, moving or whatever, and they'd stop in and, hey, I just want to train with you. So yeah, I would love that.
Great. So the last word goes to you, Coach. What do you want to say going out?
I appreciate it, man. It was nice to meet you guys. I wasn't really familiar with you guys or what you were doing until you guys reached out and asked me to come on. So I wish you all the best, and I hope I can come back. You guys are a lot of fun to talk to.
Thanks, Coach.
Thanks, Coach. Have a great night.
And thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll see you next week.